that happen, and we're quite gung-ho and very excited to see the developments along this front. A few more things would be like, I think the real advantage that Clark has is like we could cater globally because of all of the reasons that has already been presented by the panel members here. We are in a very unique, advantageous position, and we should actually do it, not tomorrow, but I think this is the right time to actually do that perfect choice. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Charlie. Thank you. Okay, let me come to Scotty next and ask you to share more about your air ambulance offering and your opening comments with us. Scotty, please.
Thank you. When I first started coming up to Clark, probably 7 or 8 years ago, I'd already fulfilled one of my dreams, and Dr. Victor reminded me this afternoon that I've already filled my second one, being in Subic and starting up the Philippines' first international 24/7 air ambulance. Also, when I first came here, I thought, what a waste of buildings and ground. About 6 weeks ago, I noticed that the conference was going to be held, so I got in touch with the secretary, who invited me over to a meeting, and here I am now on a panel. And I'm not based in Clark, I'm not based in Pampanga, I'm based at Subic. But I bring greetings from Subic, and especially from the Aviation Concepts who employ me. We fully support all the moves that you're making. I think the committee, you're doing a wonderful job, Jeff, under your chairmanship, and huge steps are being made towards what you're all talking about today. It's wonderful being part of that. Part of our philosophy at Subic is that, for your information, we run currently, we're managing 14 corporate aircraft out of Subic Bay, and we've got another 7 in the pipeline, which we hope will be online before Christmas. That's an exciting project for us, and we're employing highly skilled people, mainly Filipino people, and this has been one of our major aims, is even though we're an American company and I'm a New Zealander, we will promote the Philippines and the Philippine people. Since we started up the air ambulance, somebody summed this up very well today, I think it was Greg, that the medical service bringing skilled doctors back from overseas to the Philippines here, and this is one of our philosophies as well. We hope to, once I've read your book, I might get some more clues out of it, but we hope to continue this, bringing Philippine doctors and nurses back from overseas so they can actually live at home, earn money at home, and spread the money around the families, is what we're all trying to do. The air ambulance we operate out of Subic covers the whole of Asia, and we also provide, we have 130 staff in Makati doing logistics, mainly for Jetstar. We also run a worldwide medical escort service, and we've been bringing Filipinos back from around the world on commercial airlines. It's exciting with the startup of AirAsia, expanding the wings in Emirates and Dragonair, that we now will start tapping into Asian airlines to bring Asian people back here. The cruise lines of the world employ, I understand, 40% of the crews are Filipinos, and that's a heck of a lot of people around the world. We've already brought people back from Copenhagen, from London, and with the tie-up that we have with the hospital at Subic, which is going ahead in leaps and bounds, we offer another service that it's a hassle-free, landing at Subic and going 15 minutes to the hospital, or landing at Clark and going 30 minutes with a red light going, instead of facing the ever-growing traffic congestion in Manila. We also have bases in Guam, because we're a Guam registered company, and we've just recently opened in Tokyo. Basically, that's about it for me. The the saturation of Hong Kong and the likes of the starting up in China, the expanding commercial, non-commercial flights there, has made one of the reasons why we decided to expand to Subic. And we understand that there are 40 new aviation business private companies forming in China in the next few years. Hopefully we will attract them over to Subic/Clark to carry out their maintenance, etc. One thing came through after the lunch is that some of the previous speakers I spoke to said we must promote Clark Subic as a one item rather than fragmented, and we fully support that. Thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to the rest of the conference.
Thank you, Scotty. Thank you. Okay, well, well done for establishing this very critical service for air ambulance, and thank you for joining our panel. And I'll come back later to this point about the Subic and Clark being one as opposed to two. And have you got a microphone, Dennis? Let's ask Dennis for his opening comments from Peregrine International Development, please.
Thanks, Mark. I've been studying the country since 1972 when I first landed here, and have been very much part of being up close and personal and seeing it change. What brought us here in 2005, and again, we started the due diligence on our project in 2005, long before anybody really could spell Clark. And if you go back to 2005, the SE Techs hadn't been really started. It had been discussed. There really was no locators here at Clark. Luen Tai certainly was here. But the major Japanese industrial park was here. But the explosive growth, nobody had even seen it. Nobody could even envision it coming. It was my personal belief at the time, by looking at demographics and at world events, that led me to believe that there was an opportunity to create a logistics hub at Clark. And originally our focus was Subic, but eventually became convinced that Clark was it because of the airport. And a lot of the things that Greg had talked about, and that's articulated in the book on Aerotropolis and the impact of aviation and airports on world economies. But when you had that in your mind, and you have that in your being, and you believe that airports is critical to the future, and I don't think anybody could have articulated that better than what Greg did earlier. But if you really believe that, and then you looked at what was going around with globalization, higher cost of wages in manufacturing in the West, and in order to be competitive in a global market, you had to reduce costs, and the only way you can reduce costs is really through outsourcing or bringing in cheap labor into where you're at. At the same time, China was emerging, and the Philippines is sitting here on the doorsteps of China. It had an abundant, low-cost workforce. But more importantly, it spoke one of the world's standard languages, the language of aviation, the FAA, the language of maritime shipping, the language of Microsoft. And then you look back at history and you recognize that the Philippines was sitting at the crossroads of the Pacific, literally. It sits on the northbound interstate commerce, in this particular case, not highway or railroad, but a shipping lane between the industrialized nations of Japan and Korea in the north, the entire eastern seaboard of China down through to Singapore, and the Philippines is exactly halfway in the middle. It's also on the east-west route because of all the traffic coming through the Straits of Malacca, and generally continues either south through the San Bernardino Straits or through the Surigao Straits. And so the Philippines, this isn't nothing new. The Spaniards figured that out. Greg talked about that. The Chinese figured that out. The Americans had their two largest strategic bases in the Pacific here. All you had to do was put those pieces together and realize there was no alternative. And then when you factored that in with the growth of domestic air and where are all those people going to fly to because they all have relatives in Manila, you recognize there was really only one viable alternative, and that was Clark. And since then, for somebody who was trying to get people to commit to investing and taking on a $3 billion liability, not a 3 billion peso liability, but a $3 billion liability, you have to be pretty sure about what you're saying. And to sit there and convince somebody to put your money where your mouth is and to put it here. And so, yes, there was not a single banker, not a single attorney, not a single businessman, not the world's leading real estate experts, not CBRE, Jones Lang LaSalle, or Colliers, not a single entity in 2005 or 2006 or 2007 or 2008, not one of those experts from any of those industries believed in Clark. I fought hard to get an investor to take a trip here, spend the time to understand what was going on, and I feel definitely very much vindicated by after we made that decision to have watched Texas Instruments, Samsung, Yokohama's expansion, all of the other locators that have come in here, to see AirAsia put a hub here, to now see Emirates come here, is a vindication of something that no one really believed in the early years. Now, as refreshing as that is, most people today can somewhat see it. But we still have too many people in Imperial Manila who don't see it. And so, one, I compliment Jeff for conceptualizing this conference, getting the support of the people who sponsored and co-organized this event, because it's through education and information. And if there was one slide that you should have paid attention to that Greg had up there, illiteracy is not from the lack of education, but illiteracy is coming from the lack of the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And we have too many people who fit that category that haven't realized that they need to unlearn what they think had been happening and relearn that Clark is happening and get the public sector behind what the private sector has put their money where their mouth is, and now let the public sector recognize that the private sector got it right and get in the parade and help make it happen at a higher, faster, more accelerated rate.
Okay, thanks very much, Dennis. Thank you. All right, we've had the opening comments from our 6 panelists. We're open for discussion and your feedback, your questions, or your comments that you have for our private sector panel. No questions as yet. I'll pursue on with this first one. So, Angelito, I want to bring you in first here. Based on what we just heard from Dennis rounding up the opening comments there, how can your organization help? Did you call it Imperial Manila?
Yes,
all right, okay. So how can obviously an independent and neutral organization, how can you help the private sector deal with the what do you call them? Are they mandarins in Imperial Manila? How can you bring an independent sector voice to address some of these problems that Dennis articulated? And I think I saw a few nodding heads when he was talking about it as well. Share with us.
Actually, here in Clark, we have also the Chamber of Commerce here, the Clark Chamber of Commerce, and we have Subic Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
So we will talk to them. And actually, the one that I discussed earlier about the Subic problem, when I was one also of the speaker at the Subic Bay Maritime Authority, it was already addressed, and I think it was resolved. So it's more of talking to the local chamber here.
Okay.
Because for your information, PCCI is represented all over the country. We have 135 local chambers in the country.
All right.
So I'll make sure to get in touch with the president of the local chamber here.
Okay, so we have a local chamber here
Yes,
in Clark,
yes.
and a separate one in Subic.
Yes, separate one. Then we have also Pampanga Chamber of Commerce and Industry too.
Okay, many chambers.
And we have
of commerce.
also Metro Manila, Metro Angeles Chamber of Commerce and Industry.
Okay. All right, so the Chamber of Commerce is one avenue, and that would, the local ones would reach into your national organization to help get these issues through in Manila.
Well, it's not actually reaching, but they are represented by their vice president for North Luzon,
Okay.
which is attending our board meetings every month.
All right. Okay, good. Let me ask, Charlie, you mentioned about supply chain excellence and the Philippines being the capital of the world for procurement and supply chain. We heard earlier today some comments about building centers of excellence for educational institutions and bringing in students to come into Clark specifically, or the surrounding area of Clark. How would that map into some of the capabilities that you are talking about development in terms of global supply chain excellence?
That's a very good, look at it. We're approaching different organizations or companies to actually embrace, the concept that supply chains makes a significant difference, for sustainability, managing risk, and being competitive. In addition to just working closely with companies, the companies are always telling us that where do we get this talent? And we see a great fit between the institute, like the Procurement and Supply Institute of Asia, which is the affiliate of ISM, which is the Institute for Supply Management in the US, to actually get to draw much more closer with the academic sector over here. As you know, in our schools, most of you probably are graduates of business or commerce, or even medicine. But when it comes to procurement, operations management, or supply chain, you never get that course in your lifetime. You learn it as you move ahead with your with your jobs, right? I learned something from Dennis in one of the presentation of Dennis here. Sabi niya, hindi pwede ang pwede na. And it actually struck me, that if we want to become a country that's highly competitive, look at Singapore. Singapore, why is Singapore so efficient? Because they practice good supply chain management concepts, They don't talk about it, they really practice it. And going back to the questions, like, there has to be a strong partnership, not only with the business entities here, but also with the academe. And education can be face-to-face, but another thing that we're putting up, education can also become virtual. Even at this age, I'm still undertaking a PhD that is virtual in supply chain. I mean, you get that. There's a lot of tools available, like e-learning, e-books, e-videos, and there's a great potential. If you want companies here to be competitive, I think there's enough justification that companies has to really embrace good supply chain management concept. And organizations like BPO, KPOs organizations has to be made available over here, because you can always teach them, but if you don't assist them, it's very hard to actually evolve. So you really have to get people over here and make an investment that you're going to be around to actually enable them to make it actually happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. Renee, you mentioned a couple of things on the talent aspect. So there's a potential opportunity, Clark, to have incoming inbound students make education for foreign students one of the business sectors here. Of course, the corollary to that is what you said, is that when you set up here, you found that the local supply of labor was eminently trainable, and when these people went to Singapore, they were like the star performers among the work team. Tell us a little bit more about that, because you sounded that what you'd got out of the local manpower was better, even better than what you'd expected. Yeah.
As I mentioned, the supply of manpower here is really abundant. There's There's not that many schools that are doing the aviation programs that we need. But we're getting them from all over the Philippines, not only in Pampanga. As much as possible, we need to get it from Pampanga because they tend to stay if they're from the region. But we also go to Manila, we go to Cebu, and we get them here, we train them for 1 year, and they become highly skilled mechanics that, in fact, they rise very fast in our ranks. We have some trainees that are now third-level mechanics already. If they had gone to Singapore and stayed there, by this time they would have been just technicians. But here they're called mechanic Ace, which is one of the highest levels already. And that's just a period of the last 3.5 years that we've been operating. So we always encourage them. I know that the students, they come into school, they take an aviation course with the mindset that they will be working abroad. So we encourage them, look at a career in the Philippines, because here you have the potential to have a fulfilling career if you stay. You go abroad, you stay at a certain level, you come back here, you're left behind. So it's quite, it's remarkable actually. We're so happy about that.
All right, very
May I
pleased
chime
to-
in?
Yes, please, man. Yeah.
I'm using my female card here and butting in. No, but I just wanted to affirm exactly what you said. In AirAsia Philippines, a full 66% of our bus, we're about 213 employees now, come from Northern and Central Luzon. And of the 66%, more than half of that, or a full 36% of the total, come from Pampanga. So there's a wealth of very well-educated, talented people, and particularly in the aviation industry, you need people with the right attitude. You need people who are hospitable, who genuinely enjoy talking to people. And our cabin crew, for instance, are very much in demand. We typically have to train and recruit and train our cabin crew and our flight deck ahead of getting our aircraft. And the one advantage we have being allied with AirAsia is that there are 5 other companies that would be willing to take our crew while we're waiting for our aircraft to come. So I believe that the Filipino cabin crew are among the most sought after in the AirAsia group. So we're really proud of that, because with each aircraft we'll be adding about 80 more people, and we are contributing to Northern Central Luzon and to Pampanga, and we don't have to go very far.
Very good. Does that lead on, let me have a follow-on question then, does that lead on that if your Filipino staff are sought after within the AirAsia group, does that therefore lead to the fact that they're sought after by the other budget airlines as well?
Oh yes, they are.
So coming into, when you've got the star performers, your competitors want to, so tell us a bit about what you do for retention. Once you've got these great people and their staff, what do you do about staff retention to prevent them going to some of the other budget carriers?
Well, first of all, we pay very competitive wages. I think if you compare us to the local airlines, we pay very, very good wages. But also our people policy is very enlightened. We have a very flat organization. It's an open, you come to our office here in Clark, and it's a former warehouse that we gutted down. It's an open space. I don't even have my own private office. I'm in one corner. I have, of course, the largest space because everybody always comes for meetings over on my desk. But it's totally wide open. We encourage people to, speak out. We try to take care of their benefits as well. We look after their well-being, because if you're going to be, we believe that if you take care of your people and you treat them well, they will treat your customers well, and you can tell the difference. So far, I think, knock on wood, I believe we have a very good record, and if you've had the chance to fly with us, you can speak to our staff, and you'll see how genuinely happy they are.
Okay, great, thank you. Scotty, how have you found the HR environment? Because you've got another angle on it, in that I think you said you were giving the opportunity for Philippine doctors and nurses to effectively come back and work at home rather than having to work overseas. Is that part of what you said you were enabling through your services. Tell us a bit more about that.
It's a funny thing in the world that, especially relating it to my own experience in the South Pacific, that if you look at the doctors in Australia, you'll find that they're probably all New Zealanders. If you look at the doctors in New Zealand, you'll probably find they're from the Philippines. If you look at the doctors in the Philippines, you'll find that they're wanting to go and work overseas. Now, what we're trying to do is reverse the trend, so that it's going to be a double hit for me, because I'll get all the New Zealanders back in New Zealand instead of being in Australia. But if we can attract the Philippine doctors back here, okay, we're only a small operation just now. We've got 9 doctors on the roster. But that would be a great start if we could get 9 doctors who have had overseas experience in America, in New Zealand, Australia, to come back into the country and remain in the country and teach the local people up to a higher standard. And this is part of our philosophy.
Okay, thanks, Scotty. Any comments or questions from the... Oh, Jeff, thank you. Jeff's got a...
I just had a quick comment based on some of the responses on labor, education, quality of talent pool in this area. I think it's somewhat of a misconception that Region 3 or Clark, Subic, these areas are kind of provincial and maybe there's not a lack of, or there's a lack of talent or lack of educational options. Of the 7 provinces within Region 3, 5 of them are Tier 1 by the NSO standards in terms of education, in terms of income per capita, affluency, all the various metrics that they use. Even more important than that is probably the fact that outside of the National Capital Region, the largest graduate numbers come out of Region 3. So the capital region's number 1, and then number 2 in the rest of the country is Region 3. So in terms of getting access to the best talent and wanting to retain that talent in where you're operating, this is probably an ideal location. And I think a lot of that has to do with the legacy left over from the military installations, which Dennis has talked about this before, but for year on year, for maybe 50 years, they recruited 2,000 Filipino men directly in the U.S. Navy as you know, seamen, and the bases themselves were run by Filipinos. You know, 20,000 here at Clark, 30,000 over in Subic. That legacy carried over to friends and family getting jobs in the bases, then their children being able to get educated. I think that has a lot to do with what you see today now with the amount of universities, technical institution, vocational programs that are here in this area and provide that talent pool.
Good, thanks very much for sharing, Jeff. Let me bring in Dennis then and ask for when people are prospective locators are talking to you about Global Gateway Logistics City, what are the sort of things that they're looking for that we don't have readily available? What are the gaps in the, not necessarily from Peregrine perspective, but in the overall value proposition for somebody coming in to either set up a logistics hub or set up an operational plant? You mentioned some great success stories. I think you said Samsung, Texas Instruments, Yokohama. What about the other guys? What are they hesitating about?
I'm going to come to that, but I have to comment on this labor issue.
Oh, please.